It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story, 6 months of agony. Israeli protesters demand the release of their loved ones still held by Hamas as almost all Israeli troops withdraw from southern Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu says his country is just a step away from victory, but with fresh talks in Egypt, suggestions tonight that Israel could be moving closer to a deal with Hamas. Also tonight, prime suspect. Police want to find this man after a woman is stabbed to death in Bradford. Waiting to be plunged into darkness, millions across North America get ready for a rare total eclipse. Plus, nearly a year and 10,000 miles after setting off, Britain Russ Cook becomes the first person to run the entire length of Africa. The unvarnished truth, why thousands of nail technicians are raising their prices from tomorrow.
No, I can't help it. I just cannot help
Hoping for harmony, a warm-up for Eurovision begins, but there's controversy over the inclusion of Israel. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. His popularity has suffered a huge decline during the war with Hamas, but today, exactly 6 months since the October 7th attacks, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insisted his country is just a step away from victory. At the same time, though, an Israeli delegation was resuming ceasefire negotiation talks in Cairo as the military made a surprise announcement that could instead prove a step towards a deal with Hamas. Well, Israel said today it has withdrawn almost all of its ground troops after 4 months of fighting in the Han Yunis area. Only one of Israel's brigades remains in the region, securing the Netzarim corridor, which divides the Gaza Strip. Well, a ground invasion of the southern city of Rafah, where most or more than half of Gaza's 2.3 million population have taken refuge, has long been planned. And it's not yet clear what this withdrawal actually means for that operation. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, reports now from Jerusalem.
4 more Israeli soldiers were killed fighting Hamas in southern Gaza on Saturday. Their funerals were held today at the Mount Herzl Military Cemetery in Jerusalem. Support for the military in Israel remains strong, but after 6 months of war and thousands dead, there is anger here now on all sides. Many feel that this has gone on long enough.
As I'm standing next to my boys coughing, I'm pleading and asking, enough, stop, stop with the hatred, please. Let's learn to love, learn to listen, stop labeling each other and understand that we have nothing but each other.
Israel has clearly not defeated Hamas in Khan Yunis, but today the IDF announced that overnight it had withdrawn all ground forces from southern Gaza. It is a significant moment and marks a new phase in this war.
We're marking today 6 months of war. The achievements of the war are great. We eliminated 19 out of 24 Hamas battalions, including senior commanders. We killed, wounded, or captured a significant number of Hamas terrorists.
A senior Israeli government source has told Sky News that the killing of 7 World Central Kitchen employees this week changed everything. Ceasefire negotiations are resuming in the Egyptian capital, Cairo. There is huge expectation now on Israel to compromise.
This is the highest number of children murdered in any given conflict, the highest number of doctors, the highest number of journalists, the highest number of hospitals, schools. Israel has been engaged for 6 months in genocide.
Marking 6 months since the war began, hostage families held a vigil in Tel Aviv. They believe the Israeli government has blood on its hands and time is running out.
The feeling is that we're forgotten behind, all the hostages. here in Israel and also around the world. And I'm calling everybody, don't forget them, do everything to bring them back home.
This has been a long and hard 6 months for everyone here, Israelis and Palestinians. Events over the past week have changed things, though. It now feels like this war could be at another turning point. Alistair Bung, Sky News in Jerusalem.
Well, back in the UK, the Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron has announced plans for a £9.7 million package of humanitarian assistance for Gaza, while the Royal Navy is being deployed to get more aid into the territory. The government has also made clear that support for Israel is not unconditional, as our political correspondent Serena Barker-Singh reports.
His house was burned, and as he left the house, he was shot.
A painful reminder of the deadly attack on Israel. At this synagogue in North London, families of the hostages still missing, marking 6 months since the 7th of October attacks.
I don't have days and nights. It's like a nightmare for us.
Unwavering support from the Prime Minister back then.
I've just spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu to assure him of the UK's steadfast support.
But today, a shift in tone from his cabinet.
We're not giving carte blanche, and we have robust conversations with Israel. Indeed, both our Prime Minister had conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the Foreign Secretary had conversations with his opposite number. Of course, Israel has made mistakes and made big mistakes, and we should hold them to account for that. But we are holding them to a very high standard.
One of those mistakes, an attack on aid workers in Gaza last week. 3 British charity workers were killed by Israeli drones. The Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron, in an op-ed today, said there was no doubt who was to blame and that Britain's support for Israel is not unconditional. He announced this weekend a plan to deliver £9.7 million of aid to Gaza, though a reported split in cabinet over UK arms sales to Israel. Labour pressing the government again today to publish the Foreign Office legal advice after hundreds of lawyers wrote to Rishi Sunak reminding the government of its obligations under international law.
I've said that I have serious concerns about a breach in international humanitarian law in regard to this. And it's for that reason that I'm asking David Cameron to be very clear and to publish the legal advice, because this is serious for the British people.
Rishi Sunak has marked 6 months on from those Hamas attacks, reiterating Israel's right to defend its security and supporting a humanitarian pause. A noticeable shift in tone from the government today, though out of step with the tens of thousands still taking to the streets weekly and supporting an immediate ceasefire. Serena Barker-Singh, Sky News.
Well, let's speak to Alistair Bunkle, who is in Jerusalem for us. Alistair, 6 months on from October 7th, and we've had a lot of developments over the past few weeks and even days. Do you sense a shift in Israel's strategy in this war?
Yeah, I do, to be honest, because I think if you look at events this week, what happened just under a week ago in the tragic killing of 7 aid workers working for World Central Kitchen, Israel has admitted fault, and I sense in briefings they were very shaken by what had happened there, and clearly it was a moment when particularly the White House, that has grown increasingly frustrated with Israel's conduct in this war, could legitimately put even more pressure on Israel. And since then, we've had a number of developments really quite rapidly. The announcement that aid could now go through the Erez crossing into northern Gaza, aligned with the fact that Ashdod port would be open to receive aid by sea. I mean, that in and of itself is a big announcement, because assuming that it does come into working practice sooner rather than later, it should see a lot of aid get into the north of Gaza where it's most needed. Then you have, I think, Israel being quite forward-leaning in ceasefire negotiations, hostage negotiations in Cairo. They've sent their 2 top senior intelligence officials. They've landed there this evening, reportedly with quite a broad, loose mandate in order to negotiate. And then the news today that they have withdrawn all troops from southern Gaza. Now, Israel is saying that's temporary. They're saying they still will go into Rafah, and maybe they will do. But given that Hamas have been consistent in saying that they want to see the withdrawal of all Israeli forces from Gaza, something that the Israelis are not going to do, perhaps the withdrawal of troops from the south might be a compromised position by Israel. And we haven't really seen the Israelis being that compromising through the last 6 months.
Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle there. Alistair, thank you. Now, police investigating a fatal stabbing in Bradford have named a suspect. A 27-year-old woman was attacked yesterday afternoon in the city centre and she died later in hospital. Our North of England correspondent Shingi Mararike reports now from Bradford.
This is the man wanted in connection with the fatal stabbing of a woman in broad daylight. 25-year-old Habiba Massam from Oldham. He is pictured here on CCTV, wearing a duffel jacket with 3 large horizontal lines of grey, white and black, as well as light blue or grey tracksuit bottoms and maroon trainers. It's not known if Massam, who has links to Chester and Burnley, is armed. A knife has been recovered from the scene in Bradford, where officers continue to scour the area for evidence in the aftermath of a stabbing at a busy junction. Gio Khan, who owns a shop nearby, knew the victim, who he says was a young mother pushing a pram at the time. He rushed to help as she lay injured, but it was too late.
She used to come every single second day, very charmful, smiling all the time on her face with her 2-3 friends. And then yesterday I heard people screaming, a lady screaming. I went down, and then her best friends, they were with her, and they say, Uncle, so-and-so has died. She was on the ground. I tried, there was me, other guy, we tried, but looks like she was gone.
There is still a very visible police presence at the scene of an incident that took place at the height of the afternoon on the outskirts of the city centre. Officers will be carrying out extra patrols to try and reassure the public.
West Yorkshire Police have also released a statement to further address concerns. Detective Chief Inspector Stacey Atkinson said, "We have had significant resources following up a number of lines of inquiry to locate Habiba Massam, but at this time, his whereabouts are unknown. If anyone has any information about his movements or whereabouts since 3:20 p.m. on Saturday, please contact police as a matter of urgency. We understand that the murder of a young woman in such shocking circumstances has caused considerable concern in the local community." The 27-year-old woman killed has not yet been formally identified, but her family are being supported by specialist officers as this murder investigation and manhunt continue. Shingi Mararike, Sky News, Bradford.
Millions of people across North America will experience the rare phenomenon of a total solar eclipse tomorrow. It's the first to plunge the continent into darkness since 2017. And for many, it's something of an obsession, as our science correspondent Thomas Moore now explains.
It is perhaps the greatest show from Earth, a total solar eclipse when the moon's shadow turns day into night. This one will stretch from coast to coast across North America. Here's the path of totality, a little over 100 miles wide. More than 30 million people living within it will see the moon completely block out the sun. Even further away, there's a chance of seeing a partial eclipse, as long as there's no clouds, of course. It starts out in the Pacific, reaching the coast of Mexico at 11:07 a.m. local time. That's just after 7 p.m. in the UK. Darkness will last up to 4 minutes, 28 seconds. Then the moon's shadow, or umbra, races northeast at more than 1,500 miles an hour into Texas, through the Midwest, up to Ohio, New York, Vermont and Maine, 15 states in all. Then into Canada and out over the Atlantic 100 minutes later. By cosmic coincidence, the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, but right now it's also 400 times closer to the Earth. So the two appear to us to be the same size. When the moon passes between the sun and the Earth, it blocks out the light, casts a shadow on the planet's surface. Those within the path are in for a treat. First, the temperature plummets. Then, seconds before totality, there's a flash and Bailey's beads appear, a a few bright spots of sunlight shining through valleys on the edge of the moon. Sometimes the eclipse looks like a diamond ring. And then totality, when the moon and sun perfectly align. In the dim twilight, the brilliant white corona, the sun's outer atmosphere, becomes visible, streaming out into the dark sky. And minutes later, the sun re-emerges and daylight returns. It is special, and it's rare.
Well, let's cross live now to Brattleboro in the US state of Vermont and speak to our correspondent, Mark Stone. So, Mark, are people getting excited about the eclipse where you are?
They very much are. Special and rare, as Thomas says, and I'm lucky enough to be one of millions of people across the United States, across Mexico and across Canada who will see this. In fact, more people will see this eclipse than at any point since civilization began. A quite extraordinary fact. We're at a bar here in Vermont, just on the border between Vermont and New Hampshire, and I want to talk to a few people who have gathered here. In fact, travelled, haven't you? Some from quite a long way, from Nevada, to see this. You've travelled from Nevada. Sir, let's talk to you because we're lucky enough to have found a scientist. A school scientist. Tell me why you're so excited.
Scientist is a stretch. I teach middle school children, you know, in my other job.
Tell me why you're so excited about
it.
this.
I'm excited to just, this is my first full solar eclipse. And so I've never done it before. So
like so many of us.
Exactly, right. So it'll be great to be out there. It's also, I'm kind of actually excited because it brings people together. You know, people have traveled very far. We got guests in from California here. And yeah, we're just going to see what happens.
That's so true. I thought that earlier, actually. It's a unifier at a time when maybe we're not all that unified. Ma'am, just tell us what brought you here.
Yeah, we're just really excited, and we have no idea. Is there going to be a ton of traffic? Is it going to be totally fine getting up there? We don't know. So we're ready for anything, and we're excited to see it. We're excited to bring our kids. This will definitely be their first time along with us. So we're ready for anything, and we're just excited to be there. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Among so many people, of course. And it is a really special moment, a cosmic moment, one that none of us have got any control over. Everyone is obsessing about the cloud cover, though, because in some parts of the United States, it's not going to be great. Here in Vermont, we're hopeful.
Sounds like it's going to be amazing. Mark Stone with the latest there from Vermont. Mark, thank you. And you can watch our full coverage tomorrow with Total Eclipse live from 7 p.m. Now, it's taken him nearly a year covering a distance of almost 390 marathons. But today, British man Russ Cook finished running the length of Africa. And it wasn't without a few hiccups along the way. Well, he began his remarkable journey at Cape Agulhas, South Africa's the southernmost point of the African continent, in April last year. Now, a month later, he crossed into Namibia, traveling alone through the desert for 24 hours. In Angola, he and his team were robbed at gunpoint. They had cameras, phones, and crucially, their passports stolen. In August, Russ went missing for days in the jungle in the Democratic Republic of Congo. His team eventually managed to free him by paying off villagers armed with machetes. In January, he had to secure special permission to cross the border from Mauritania into Algeria, the only route available to him, given violence in areas in North Africa. Well, now his astonishing journey over 10,000 miles and through 16 countries is finally over. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris reports from Tunisia.
The moment a mammoth mission was accomplished, the length of Africa run as never before. One epic year-long journey over. How did Russ Cook even find the energy to celebrate? Appreciation for all the adulation. Unlike anything imagined when this endeavour began last April, a draining and dangerous journey, more than 100 days longer than hoped. But after so long solo, a support cast for the final leg.
Yeah, all right. How are we all doing? Everyone ready to run a marathon? Yeah. All right, let's do it then.
And we join the journey into history.
To be fair, a bit tired, but one more day, one final push, get this thing done.
But you seem so calm and relaxed.
with all the energy? Yeah, I've had a few tears this morning, so I've got it out of my system. But yeah, I'm just trying to make sure we're going the right way. Does anyone know?
I couldn't get off work.
Through the Tunisian countryside, dozens flew in to join the final 47k.
You don't look like a man who's spent a year on the road, more than 10,000 miles.
Yeah, it's quite a lot, actually. Honestly, yeah, it's crazy, and like, how can you be tired when there's this many people running with you? Do you know what I mean? It's so much energy.
Do you feel the hardest, Geezer? Good luck.
A final marathon and more on the final day, ending on the shores of the Med.
After 352 days, Russ Cook is completing his extraordinary endeavour, running the length of Africa.
Hard to keep up with approaching the finish line, even though he's the one who's run more than 385 marathons in a year.
You know, I just ran my first 10k in 5 years on Tuesday last week in preparation for this. I was just like, do whatever it takes, get out here, be a part of it.
I think for me, the realisation that my wife got pregnant, had a baby, we now have a 2-month-old in the time he's done this.
What was the hardest moment?
So many difficult ones, man. I think the biggest thing is that it's 352 days on the road. It's building, it's constant, and there is no let off. So yeah, it's amazing to finally finish.
More than £600,000 has been raised for charity. This unprecedented quest across the continent complete. Africa run from its southern to northern tips. Just don't tempt Russ Cook to swim home. Rob Harris, Sky News at Ras Angela, northern Tunisia.
More than 5,000 nail technicians across the UK are collectively raising their prices from tomorrow in what is being labelled National Nail Price Increase Day. The company behind the movement said it's taking action after calculating that its members are only making around £7 an hour, which is way below the minimum wage. Becky Cottrell reports.
A trip to the nail salon is a ritual for so many women, the staple beauty treatment. But the upkeep can add up. And from tomorrow, some customers will find their manicure that bit more expensive. Lauren Pritchard runs a nail bar in Birmingham. She's having to put up treatment prices by £2 or £3.
With things like the cost of even like a box of gloves has nearly doubled since, I'd say, in the last 4 years, since COVID really. Gas and electric and the cost of opening the salon on a day-to-day basis have increased massively. They've probably doubled.
Lauren is one of more than 5,000 nail technicians who'll be raising prices, but they're competing with an unregulated industry where there are already concerns some businesses are exploiting migrant workers to keep prices low.
Do you worry about customers going to cheaper salons?
I've had lost a couple of clients, which is always going to be scary, but I'm quite confident in how different the service is. We offer a bespoke service.
Many nail technicians say they're actually being paid far less than the minimum wage of £11.44. Currently, the average nail treatment costs £38 for an hour-and-a-half appointment, but £25 of that goes towards the cost of products and tools, meaning a profit of just £13, which works out at £8.70 per hour for the technician. When pension, tax and national insurance contributions are taken out, that hourly wage is more like £7.
So for a very, very, very long time.
The woman leading the campaign for higher pay says action is overdue.
This isn't just so that we can put some money in, extra money in our back pocket. It's actually so that we can earn a fair income.
At this salon in Nottingham, the prices aren't going up, but we asked customers how they'd feel about paying more for their manicure.
Cost of living's gone up for everybody. It doesn't seem fair that hairdressers have gone up, but nail salons still stay the same price.
I probably would minimise getting my nails done to more occasional events if it went up by £5 each time, because I get my nails done twice a month, so that's like an extra £10 a month.
This industry isn't unique in having to balance increasing overheads with the need to stay competitive. But as so many high street shops have disappeared, nail salons have remained and thrived. Now workers say it's time they were paid fairly. Becky Cottrell, Sky News, Birmingham.
Let's get the latest sport now from Sky Sports News and Julia.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
I'd never really thought it was anything other than the norm until I got to like 24, 25. I was spending so much of my day just worrying about a certain way I was doing everything I was doing. It would take up so much of your day, add extra stress and extra worry to your life.
When were you first diagnosed with OCD? What kind of led to the diagnosis?
Throughout my whole childhood, I would have to do certain things to feel okay or to feel safe, or for my friends and family and loved ones for me to have like peace of mind that nothing bad was going to happen or anything like that. There'd always be so many different things that I'd have to do to sort of like a checklist. Never really spoke about it with anyone else, but I just thought that was something you do. It wasn't until I mentioned it to a couple of people when I was playing Exeter Chiefs, and they said, yeah, that's a bit weird, like you shouldn't be doing that.
What kind of things were you doing or thinking?
So there's a light switch on the wall there. I'd have to click it the right way. I don't know how you describe the right way, but to me there was a right and a wrong way to click a light switch on and off. If I didn't do it right, I had to do it a certain amount of times. And if I didn't do it right on the final one, I had to do it more times. Getting changed, I had to tap my toes on the floor before I put my socks on. Left foot first, right foot second, always. I had a certain order of getting changed. I had a bedtime routine, it took me about an hour to get to bed. But it was all because I would think that if I didn't do it, either something bad would happen to myself, my family, my friends, anything like they'd hurt themselves or they'd die or get ill or something. And it progressed and progressed over the years and got worse and worse, and I'd have to keep doing more things and more things. Now I look back on it, having had some help and spoken about it, that it is ridiculous, because the way you turn a light switch off isn't going to mean your parents die. For some reason, my mind was making me think that was going to have an effect.
How did this manifest itself within your rugby?
It was so ingrained in my life that it just naturally progressed into my rugby. It was in all sport I played. I had to do things certain ways. The main part of where I feel it is getting dressed and getting changed ready for a game. A big one was boots, shoelaces. I had a very specific way I had to tie my laces. A certain amount of times I had to tie the loops and pull the string, the shoelace, how tight I pulled it and all things like that. The first time I ever tried to tie my boots and just tie them normally, as you'd probably tie yours, I tied the left one right well, and I tied the right one. I messed up on what I would normally have done, but I was like, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. Tied my lace. In that game, I broke my leg, and that didn't help, obviously, because I'd done it in the week in training to see if it would be fine, and I was fine during the week. And I was like, right, it'll be fine in the game. Broke my leg. That was one of the worst injuries I've ever had. Yeah, it wasn't ideal. It definitely knocked the confidence with it for a while and threw me back a few steps.
Do you believe that you broke your leg because you didn't tie your shoelace properly?
During that time, I was definitely thinking about it all the time. I was like, why did it happen? Was it because of this? I didn't tie my shoelaces right. I actually burnt the boots that I broke my leg in as well. Like, if I have to ever wear those again, I might break my leg again. Now I look back on it and think, yeah, absolutely not, no way did it affect it.
What work have you done to kind of try and deal with it?
We have a psychologist who comes down to Exeter Chiefs and sees a few of the guys. We basically sat down about it. He didn't know I had OCD, I don't think, until I mentioned it. He basically said to me, plain and simple one day, do you think the way you turn a light switch off is going to affect your family? Or if so,
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
The warm-up started in earnest today. There's controversy over the inclusion of Israel, with calls for the UK entry, Ollie Alexander, to boycott the competition. But the organisers say Eurovision is not the arena to try to solve the Middle East conflict. A warning that this report from our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer begins with some flashing images.
This is a strange old year for Europop connoisseurs, conflicted not over the appropriateness of the Finnish delegation's outfit, but whether they should even watch this year's Eurovision. Uncomfortable questions in some rather uncomfortable-looking shorts.
There's no politics allowed. Is that more challenging for you guys at the moment, given sort of what's happening in the wider world? How have you found the sort of steering thing?
I don't know, like, politics are everywhere, so we cannot, and this is so big competition, but we want to focus our show, and I want to focus the joy and happiness.
Israel not on the lineup at this London showcase, designed to woo potential voters just a month before last year's winners Sweden gears up to host.
On paper, this year sounds brilliant. Hosted in the birthplace of ABBA, marking 50 years since the band won with Waterloo. But if there's one main rule to Eurovision, it's that politics is strictly off limits. And this year, it's something that organisers couldn't escape if they wanted to.
This is Israel's entry, asked to rewrite the original lyrics as they seem to reference the October 7th Hamas attack. They did so to stay in the show, but their inclusion has fuelled widespread talk of boycotts from those who oppose the country's actions in Gaza. The diplomacy of it all, a tricky one for the UK entrant Ollie Alexander. Typically outspoken in the past, on social media there are calls for him to quit. While he hasn't, he has put his name on this though, alongside some other entrants calling for an immediate and lasting ceasefire. As did this year's singer for Ireland.
It's a crazy world out there. All I want is it to stop. It's ridiculous. We are so removed from our consciousness and humanity out there, and it's spooky.
Of course, there are ways to make statements without breaking the rules. Just ask former winner Conchita Wurst.
Art is always a reflection of the current state of our world, of the time. So I feel you can't separate it, because it's always a comment on what is going on and how the artist feels or how we feel.
I guess I always overestimate you.
Eurovision is a hard one to ignore. While one London venue has already cancelled its annual screening over Israel's inclusion, we'll find out next month whether boycotts mean less people will be tuning in.
Maybe we can dance you back to life.
Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the commentator and author Paul Connew and the barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry. Welcome both. Among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of The Guardian. Their headline, carers taken to court over heart-rending minor errors. We'll be right back.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. First, though, our top stories. Protesters have demanded the release of the remaining Israeli hostages 6 months on from the October 7th attack, after Israel pulled almost all of its troops out of southern Gaza. Police have named Habibur Massoum as the man wanted over the murder of a 27-year-old woman stabbed to death in Bradford yesterday. And British man Russ Cook has become the first person to run the length of Africa after a 10,000-mile journey from South Africa to Tunisia. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the commentator and author, Paul Connew, and the barrister and former government minister, Anna Soubry. So let's take a quick look at what is on some of those front pages. Well, The Guardian reports that tens of thousands of carers are having to repay the government after unwittingly breaking earnings rules. On the front of The Telegraph is a warning from the Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron that US lawmakers are risking security in the West by blocking a new package of support for Ukraine. The Tory party chairman says Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's unwillingness to probe claims against Angela Rayner over her property dealings were damning. That's according to the Mail. The Daily Express carries an exclusive about inadequate facilities at 1 in 5 care homes. The Sun says people are being pressured into signing up for potentially risky cosmetic procedures in Turkey at medical roadshows held in UK hotels, which also features on the front of the Daily Mirror. The Metro suggests that sentencing criminals to do unpaid work may not be an effective punishment, as an increasing number just aren't finishing it. The Eye reports that owners of new-build properties are being forced to sign non-disclosure agreements in order to see details of their estate charges. According to the Financial Times, US President Joe Biden is expected to caution China against further aggressive action in the South China Sea. And the Daily Star has a story about a dog that it reckons has been telling porkies when it comes to saying the word sausages. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the program, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Paul Connew and Anna Soubry. Thank you so much for being with us to go over the papers. Let's start with The Guardian, and really let's start with a story that's in lots of the papers, Gaza. But this is a slightly different take. Here, the title is Disappeared, Anguish in Gaza over the missing thousands. And it says that literally thousands of people have basically been, well, reported missing to the ICRC, the International Committee for the Red Cross. Anna, tell us a little bit more about what the story is.
So this starts with the story of one man, Ahmed Abu Jalala, who went out one night in March to find food for, I think he has 6 children, and he just simply didn't come back. And in some ways, I think it's fair to say, because obviously we have a look at this, don't we, Paul, before we come in. In a way, this is not surprising. I mean, we know that the figures coming out from the health authorities in Gaza, which we know are controlled by Hamas, I mean, they put the figures at 33,000 people. 3,000 have died in this terrible, terrible conflict. But it just seems it's common sense that there must be thousands more under all that rubble. And as you say, the International Red Cross put it 7,000 calls that they've had. Yeah. I think the death toll must...
It is an extraordinary number, though, 7,000.
Oh, yeah, but I reckon it must be higher.
And this morning, Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, doing the studio rounds, implied that perhaps the figure of 33,000 was an exaggeration. Didn't quite say it, but that was the implication of his remarks. But every aid organisation, and most governments and the UN accept the figure. In fact, it may be released by the Hamas-controlled health authority, but the figures of 33,000 are not really disputed. But as Anna was saying, you just got to look at the total destruction in Gaza to know that there have to be bodies there. They haven't got the equipment to go and even even dig up the bodies. Sadly, it sounds horrific, but so there are probably thousands more. And again, most of them probably women and children rather than Hamas terrorists. I mean, that is the brutal truth.
And Hamas, of course, it must always be remembered that Hamas is the sort of bunch of terrorist thugs that don't even protect their own people. We know they use them as shields, but they've got however many hundreds of miles or kilometres of tunnels. They try and protect the people.
I suppose there is a possibility some of these could be abductions as well. I mean, we don't really know.
We don't know, but
because the press aren't allowed in.
No,
and they haven't been for the 6 months exactly.
Well,
unless you're an
we're not the Western press anyway. Let's not forget that about 100 journalists, mainly obviously local journalists, have been killed, along with almost 200 aid workers. These are grim stats.
Yeah. Let's take a look at another angle to the Gaza story, this time front page of the Times, if we can pull it up. And the headline is, UK's legal advice over Gaza stays secret. Now, the UK government has received legal advice. We've had a few leaks about it, but the Deputy Prime Minister, like you mentioned, Oliver Dowden, who was doing the rounds, saying basically they don't really have to release it. What do you make of all of this?
Well, I think if the headline was a bit longer in the Times, it could have been UK's legal advice over Gaza stays secret, ... for now. I don't think this is a sustainable position long term. Of course, Parliament is in recess back next Monday. There's going to be intense pressure, including, I think, strong pressure from the opposition parties and even some Tory MPs for David Cameron to come to the Commons, even though he's been a Lord, of course, but and face questions on this. Although you get the impression that David Cameron, probably privately, does believe that we've broken international law. There are hints of that, even though Oliver Dowden says we're going to continue our arms sales. But I think that could turn this into a general election issue if that position is maintained.
I mean, and, 6 months after October 7th, today, I mean, the phrase turning point is so overused, but do you sense that there is a turning point, both in the British government and in general, in the Western attitude to
yes. I think the killing of those aid workers last week did mark a big turning point. And I think just the way oneself sees it, it's an extraordinary situation that Israel has got itself into. The terrible atrocities on October the 7th, with hundreds of people thousands, over 1,000 people being killed, with hostages being taken, all the horrors of it. And yet somehow Israel, this great nation, in my opinion, has completely lost the moral high ground. Yeah. And it has got itself into the most desperate, dreadful situation, never mind what it's doing to the Palestinians. And I just feel, I mean, I don't know David Cameron very well. I served when he was Prime Minister in his government, and I remain a supporter of David Cameron, a lot of time for him. This will sit very heavily, in my opinion, on him, and I think he'd relish the opportunity to come to the House of Commons.
I mean, I'm not Jewish, but I have a lot of Jewish friends who are torn over this. I know friends who have marched both against anti-Semitism and in support of the Gaza victims. It's not... And I'm a great supporter of Israel, but not of the Netanyahu regime, which I think...
Apparently, lots of Israelis aren't either, if we look at the demonstrations.
And it's vital that we don't actually make opposing the Israeli government of Netanyahu and anti-Semitism. They are not the same thing. They are distinct differences.
Absolutely. Two stories I want to look at quickly. Daily Express and Guardian, sort of linked. Daily Express headline, exposed care home crisis putting Britain to shame. And then in The Guardian, carers taken to court over heart-rending minor issues. Anna, can you just talk us through?
The Daily Express one doesn't have much detail, but frankly, it's not a surprise, is it, that our care homes are in crisis? We know that. We know that they're severely underfunded, and we know that governments of all colours have failed to address this, and whoever gets elected in the next election has got to do something about it. But if I may say, I thought the story in The Guardian was
the minor errors.
Gee whiz, this is a terrible story.
I mean, that has the makings, potentially, of a sort of another post office-type scandal, especially where it seems, once again, the computer is God.
So what is the actual story? What are these errors?
There is tens of thousands, according to The Guardian, tens of thousands of unpaid carers looking after a disabled, frail or or ill relatives are being forced to repay huge sums to the government and threatened with criminal prosecution, even possible, going to prison, if they exceed by a few pounds the rules over how much they can earn if they do a part-time job as well as being a carer.
And they could have made a mistake.
Yeah.
And then it's retrospective because they...
Well, they could have made an innocent mistake, but the computer, it seems, the computers are making a mistake, and yet sums of up to £20,000 are being
Whereas some of the
demanded.
mistakes were just a few pounds.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And the point that Ed Davey makes, because he's quoted in this, is about the value of unpaid carers.
Yeah.
I mean, they are remarkable people. Frankly, they're saving us thousands, millions of pounds.
In fact, billions, according to some stats, if this wasn't there. Because, in a sense, privatisation hasn't worked in the care sector. We saw that obviously through the whole COVID crisis, but on top of that, though, those arguing, the hard line against immigration, there's no way the care sector, whether it's private or in the public domain, could actually operate without immigrants. And that's a brutal fact. We are an ageing population, and it's not a job that a lot of young people are going to volunteer for. Whether you like it or not, that's the fact.
I mean, I share your views, obviously, on the value of immigration. But I think the other thing in this is, coming back to this point about it being in the computer, is that it seems to be that the DWP, the Department of Work and Pensions, its IT system flags, it says here in The Guardian, flags up when a carer's income breaches the threshold, but fails in many cases to act on the information, allowing carers to rack up thousands of pounds of overpayments over months, before in some cases they're being pursued in front of the courts for benefit fraud.
Yeah.
Anna Paul, we're going to have to leave it there for now, but coming up are questions over Angela Rayner's previous housing arrangements threatening to damage Sir Keir Starmer. We'll discuss that next.
Well, basically, it's in two parts. Part one is 1999. I wanted to take my detective, Louise Mangan, back to her early days in the Met. 99 was very interesting. That's when the Macpherson report came out. You know, the Met were accused of being institutionally racist. And there was the terrible murder of Jill Dando, which is still unsolved. So that's fictionalised as a kind of peripheral issue. But what happens back then in 1999, then in the second part, in 2019, those strands come together. I'm delighted that you enjoyed it. And I'm delighted you read the previous two, because many people know I wrote memoirs, but they're still catching up with the fact that I'm now on to...
So what you were former Home Secretary, so you get facts and stretch them into fiction? How do you work?
No, I don't. I think I could have written these books if I hadn't been Home Secretary, but what it did do was give you a better focus on how the police work with the security service, for instance, both of them involved in this book, and how the kind of rankings work. You know, you don't become an expert overnight when you become Home Secretary on these things, but you do understand elements of it, and some of the characteristics have found their way into the book. Listen, as Home Secretary, as all previous Home Secretaries will tell you, you know things that you can never talk about, things that the security service do and the police to keep us safe.
Turn grey?
That's one of the things that made my hair turn grey. Being interviewed by people like UK was the other thing that made my hair go grey.
I was always a pussycat with you.
Yeah. So when you know these things, you can't... I mean, they're state secrets. You can never tell anyone, no matter how close they are to you. So none of that's gone into the book. I reassure anyone listening from the Cabinet Office. But the characters that you meet and, you know, you understand...
I did feel like I was there. I did feel like
Did you? Did you? Well, it's set, of course, on an island in the Thames called Tags Island that exists. So I'm a great believer that, and you've written a few yourself, that if you're going to write a novel, there has to be an element. Place is very important. And if the place is somewhere real, and you're describing real streets and real roads and, you know, real architecture, it kind of helps the fiction to be more realistic for the reader.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me in the studio, Paul Connew and Anna Soubry. OK, let's go straight to the Daily Mail. Front page, headline, Rayner's making a fool of you, Keir. So Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner accused of breaking their pledge to uphold standards in public life, accused by the Tory party chairman. Anna.
Yes. So who has not held up the standards of public life more than anybody in recent living history? Has to be said, in my humble opinion, it would be a large part of the current Conservative Party and a number of previous Prime Ministers. However, all the attention is on Angela Rayner, who, as I understand it, wasn't even an MP when this happened. So if she gets married to somebody and she has a house and he has a house, and then they have 2 children, and she says she's basically flitting between the 2 homes for whatever reason. And one of these, the home she owns, is a council house. And so she sells her home and has to pay capital gains tax, but she doesn't because she claims it as her main residence, as I can see it. Yeah. And she benefits to the tune of just over £1,000. And then the Tories are going, my old party, ballistic about this, as if it's some heinous crime of the century, and it's a full failing of public standards. Remarkably forgetting quite a few scandals of their own involving an awful lot more money. Recently, some bloke who obviously struck me as sounding like a racist, who they took £15 million from and haven't given it back.
And ennobled another donor who gave them £5 million in an unusually timed honours list. Oh, you know, I mean, let's assume even if Angela Rayner is guilty of this alleged offence, if I stress, and £1,000, as Anna was saying, compared to a dodgy 20 million donate. For Joe and Jane Public, this is a minor issue.
Oh, she does. From her tax, and we've got to take her on her face value, because she has called out people in the past, and it's a genuine question of her to say, you've called out people in the past, now you show us. And I think at the moment she's actually refusing to disclose, which I don't think is a great look.
No, I think that is a flaw, and I think Keir Starmer, it could be embarrassing, if it could come back to bite him to a certain extent. But there are those on the Tory party and the Daily Mail who who followed up the Medal and Sunday splash. It is basically a campaign. This is part, I think, of what we're going to see, perhaps the most vicious, dirty general election in living memory. Now, I think this one doesn't. To the public, it doesn't really resonate. They're not going to sort of see this as the crime of the century.
1 minute. Let's end the paper review on a good news story. On a lot of papers. There we go. This is Russ Cook, who's run the length of Africa. And at the end of it, he said, I'm a bit tired. In fairness, he said, it was good, but I'm a bit tired now. He's amazing, isn't he?
He is amazing. And during the course of this fantastic achievement, he actually they got everything robbed from them. Was it in the Congo?
Yes.
They got robbed somewhere else, and then he got kidnapped.
Kidnapped in Congo.
So they lost it, but he kept on going, and he's done it, and he's the first to do it, and he's an absolute star.
Paul, 15 seconds.
I think the Metro deserve, in fact, the prize for the best headline on this one, Run of a Kind.
Yeah.
As he salutes the camera, a Brit to be proud of.
Yeah, he is. We're going to have to leave it there. Anna, Paul, thank you. And we're going to be back in just a few minutes with more of the day's news. Thanks for watching.